Good evening and welcome to the April 24th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. If we could first please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we got some correspondence. Anything anybody want to go over in there? Okay, we got the meeting minutes from April 10th, 2023. Any comments, concerns?
Not here.
Mr. Chairman, there's also April 12th minutes in there, too, in the packet.
Okay, hang on one second. Thank you, Counselor. Yes, we got the April 10th. And the April 12th draft. Okay, any concerns, comments?
Nope.
Counselor? John?
Nothing here, no.
All right, do I have a motion to approve both the April 10th and April 12th, 2023 meeting minutes?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to move into the regular portion of our meeting. We have first on the agenda Village Traditions. This is a request for a second one-year time extension. Location's 1821 East Main Street. The owner could not be here. I spoke to John earlier. He did not think that was an issue. Does anybody have any concerns, questions?
No.
Counselor?
No.
John?
Nothing here.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, if there's no issues, could I have a motion to approve the request for the second one-year time extension?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 You know, Tom, these mics sound much better tonight. Is it me?
No.
Something's different.
Sounds better.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have Tully, also formerly known as Sandvoss Minor Subdivision. This is a decision statement. Location is 1005 Hanover Street. Dorena,
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
how are you?
Okay, good. They sound very good.
They do, right?
Yeah.
Working on having us look better. next.
Yeah.
That's right.
You gotta get rid of
Gotta
the
get a
lights.
Makeup person.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The last time I was before you, I presented the the site plan for the Tullys, formerly of Sandvoss subdivision. The Tullys are abandoning the subdivision and they're just going to build one residential house for themselves. They'll be extending the driveway out in the original path, so there's no changes there. It'll actually be less width. It'll be about 6 feet less in width, but it'll be the same length. And one of the house sites that was originally proposed is going to be the house site for their new home.
Okay,
That's it. And there was a wetland permit approved as part of the subdivision, and we're looking to either renew it or amend it, whatever it is that seems appropriate.
okay. Any concerns, comments, questions from the board?
The only question I had was the same one I raised the last time, was whether or not the board needs to do anything further if the applicant is truly withdrawing a subdivision application and building a single-family house on it, essentially one lot.
Right. The only thing I would say was that it never went beyond the proving of the resolution, so no bonds or fees
I
were put in
understand.
place and no map was filed.
Well, as the resolution, the draft resolution is written, you're amending your earlier decision to remove the approval for the 4-lot subdivision and allow the construction of the single house on the entire lot pursuant to the environmental record that's there. So
Right.
the environmental record was for impacts from the 4 homes their associated driveways, stormwater, removal of trees. So the impacts for the single home are less than the record that was established under the subdivision. So in
But you're not making
yeah,
all new findings, so
right.
you're keeping
Well,
the findings in place.
My question is, I understand all of that, and I'm certainly willing to, support the resolution as drafted if that's what we need to do. I just wondered if, just as a jurisdictional question, if this same application came to us brand new, would we even be considering it?
No, but you have an active resolution that
Okay.
you're in a sense being asked to step back from.
Okay.
So they
and
could
this-
treat this as if the subdivision never happened, but they want to keep the environmental findings because a lot of work was done.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
this is the approach that Robin and John and I came up with.
Thank you, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay with that? John, anything on your end?
No, that's all.
Good?
Yeah,
All right, do I have a motion then for the resolution approving the amended site plan for the Sandvoss subdivision?
motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thanks very much.
Good luck. Welcome
Thank
to
you
your
all
town.
very much. Greatly
All right.
appreciate it.
All the best with the place.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the IBM Battery Energy Storage. This is a public hearing. Location's 1101 Kitchewan Road. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
We don't see the applicant.
I see that.
Well, can we go along with it? Can we have the?
We just opened,
What's that?
the hearing.
Leave
Yes.
it open. Yeah.
Leave it open? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn and hold the hearing open?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Maybe come back. Maybe.
Who knows?
Stuck in traffic. Not like him, though.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Home and Hearth. This is another public hearing. Locations 1750 East Main Street.
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself.
Yep, thank you very much. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good evening, Joseph Farina, the Principal Site Design Consultants, representing Home and Hearth. Home and Hearth is currently a business that resides in Cortland, and they're moving over into Mohegan. They sell cabinetry and stoves, wood-burning type stoves, as well as supplies and accessories for the stoves. The site, as I said, is located in Mohegan, 1750 East Main Street. To either side, this is the site here. Let me just get that. Okay. To either side of the site, you have the Volkswagen dealership to the east, and you have a gas station here to the west. There are two existing buildings on the site, and as you can see, a majority of the site has been impacted by parking area and driveway. The back part of the site is at DEC wetland, this is the limit of the wetland here. Therefore, a majority of the project is in the wetland buffer. The project that's proposed to remove the existing buildings that are on the site and construct two new buildings. A single-story, 5,500 square foot showroom, and that will also be their main operation offices, We'll have a full basement with storage in the basement. And then to the rear of the site is a warehouse that's 4,500 square feet. And as you can see, the parking will utilize approximately the same location as the existing entry into the site. And you've got parking, adequate parking on both sides of it. The driveway to the gas station cuts through the front of this property right here, and it has an easement for that access. So as part of the intrusion in the buffer, there's no wetland intrusion, but there is a buffer intrusion. There's a mitigation plan that's being proposed, and I will show that to you shortly. And the amount of buffer intrusion is 16,200 square feet. We've prepared erosion control plan. This is our stormwater plan. Most of the, or almost all the, let me say that again, all of the impervious area will be captured and put into a subsurface detention system that's going to be here under the parking lot. The overflow from that will discharge out into a rain garden, which will provide final polishing of the stormwater before it discharges into the wetland. The buildings will be served by existing utilities, sewer, public water, gas, and electric will all be underground. This is the mitigation plan that was prepared by Tim Miller Associates. It has been reviewed by the DEC. We are expecting a permit on that shortly, and the town consultant has reviewed it, and I think there's just some minor tweaking that needs to be done to satisfy their comments. Additionally, we prepared a landscape plan. A2 Landscaping, Abigail Adams, prepared a landscape plan. As you can see, it's, as usual, she does a very nice job. She's got some nice entrance plantings here, plantings across the front of the building. The planting that's going on in the stormwater rain garden, as well as in front of the warehouse. A lighting plan was done. We have do a little tweaking on that. John Tegeter picked up that this spotlight that's off the corner of the building, we're going to have to make sure that that's night sky compliant and not directed towards towards any of the adjacent properties. This is a three-dimensional view of the showroom. Retail space. This is the side facing Route 6. This is the side facing the parking lot where the main entry would be. The comments from the Architecture Review Board have been incorporated in this plan, which included bringing this glass up a little bit here. These are going to be operable doors. The base of the columns were the stone base for the columns were widened, and the stone veneer was brought up around the doorway, as well as a truss over this overhang opening, which mimics the same detail that's on the gable end of the building. This is a view from the opposite direction, looking towards Route 6. This is just a two-dimensional view. This is the warehouse building that's out in the back part of the property, the 4,500 square foot warehouse building. The Architectural Review Board asked that the doors be consistent inside, the overhead doors, in size, which is shown here, and that this feature, this glass feature, this fixed glass feature, would be shown prominently in the center of this high point in the roof. So overall, I think it's a very nice building. I had samples of the colors, and I left them at the office, but the siding is going to be a gray color, like a light to medium gray color, as depicted here. There'll be black trim in certain parts of the structure, and you'll have a standing seam metal roof over both buildings, which will have matching colors. That's all I have for my presentation.
Thank you. Anybody from the board?
No?
Anybody from the public wish to ask any questions, make any comments? It's a quiet night. Counselor, anything from your end?
Nothing from me.
John?
Nothing from us at present.
Okay. All right, that all being said, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and extend for a 10-day written period?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carried.
Thank you.
Good luck.
IBM is here.
Oh, they are? You're number 5.
Oh, wow. He's got going. I'm
right.
not logged in. Do you need me to show you?
Yeah, probably a good idea.
We
This is the
reopen.
public hearing, yes.
Motion to reopen this hearing.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, you're moving through it tonight, huh? Sorry.
I still can't get over Judge Paganelli.
What about it?
I said I can't get over it, the picture.
Tell me, it was an interesting experience.
Did he have a white wig?
Yes. He
was
sent me a
bald
picture.
as ever,
The hanging judge, too.
But he had the beautiful black robe. He was dressed.
Judge. Judge Hathorn, not Hawthorne. I go to Salem all the time. Get all the history lesson on it. Well, very interesting. All right. Sorry about that, folks.
It's all right.
I think much of this you've seen already, the project itself, the solar project. What we're really talking about is the battery project. This is just what the solar project looks like, the carport. So this is the area here where the battery is going to be. This box here, the bigger box the other box on the top there is where the medium voltage gear is for, that the battery ties into and the solar ties into as well. So that's coming into the back parking lot there. You're facing what they call the salt barn. The battery will be behind the salt barn, so you'll never see it from anywhere unless you're walking behind that building there. And that view before is like facing number 1 towards the salt barn. This next photo is going to be number 2, looking up from Pines Bridge Road. So it's way up there at the top. You'll never even see it. And then the third view here is from the neighbor's property, looking towards the salt barn. And there's obviously other equipment back there that IBM keeps for maintenance of the facility and snow removal. That's a view from behind the salt barn, and the battery will be just to the left there, right in that space down there. It's set down well below the parking lot level, so again, it won't be seen, but it'll have 7-foot fencing around it and be fully enclosed. That's sort of a rendering of it. Obviously, the elevations, the space is a little bit lower than that behind the building there. And again, that's just another view of looking at it. This is looking at the neighbor's house there, which is that from that third view earlier that I was showing, just to give you a sense of what that looks like in the back there. But it's the extra parking lot behind the main parking lot in IBM there. I know you folks have seen it. Any questions, or can I?
I think Ryan?
No questions.
No questions here.
Do you want to say there was a resident neighbor who was concerned?
Yes, the neighbor, they moved in just weeks after we started construction on the solar project,
Yep.
so it kind of caught them off guard. And there was obviously some noise during the construction phase. There was some temporary lighting that was necessary because the lights had to be taken down until the carports went up. And then they've got lights underneath them that don't cast anything up into the sky. All the temporary lighting is down now. IBM has agreed to put up a new fence in between the properties and put some trees there for landscaping. So they're doing everything they can and being good neighbors.
No, it's evident from the emails that we saw, and just want to say thank you very much for addressing those
Oh, yeah.
concerns, and I think IBM's always been a very good neighbor of the town. This is a public hearing. Anybody from the audience have any questions, concerns? Counselor?
I have nothing.
John?
Nothing at present.
Okay, that being said, do I have a motion to close the public hearing for the IBM battery energy storage with the 10-day written comment period?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
A long ride.
Yeah, well, this is what you do. And again, I apologize for being late, and I apologize to you folks as well.
No worries. Again, thank you for taking care of that neighbor. Okay, do I have a motion to move from the regular session into the work session?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first in the work session, we have SDML Realty, also known as Duncan Route 202. How are you?
Good evening. Robin, would you be able to pull up, looking for sheet C201? So since we were last before the board, we made some slight revisions to the site plan, line of sight drawings, as well as the sound report that was prepared by our sound consultant to address the comments that the board had, as well as some of the members of the public during the public hearing last month. We had a meeting with the Conservation Board as well, discussed some of their revisions and comments on the plan. Some of those were incorporated into the plan, others were left out, and I will explain those. And then I'll go through the plan and the revisions that were made, and the correspondence that we had with both John and Robin with some of these outstanding items to move this project to a place where the board would feel comfortable issuing a negative declaration and preliminary approval so we can move on with our applications with the DOT and DEP. First is concerning the lighting plan. The lighting plan that was prepared demonstrates foot candle readings at the property line of 0, None of the fixtures on the site are casting any light, or there's no tilt to the fixtures. They're all downward-facing fixtures. The fixtures along the rear property line and as well as along the front property line closer to the entrance have glare shields on them to prevent any light exiting the site onto the neighboring properties. And lastly, we incorporated the proposed light fixtures into the line of sight profiles from the neighbor's point of view. Should be two or three sheets after that one you're on, Robin. There we go. So it's a bit difficult to see, but we included the proposed light fixtures and their mounting height. The fixtures are 12.5 feet high, and they're shown on that diagram as they look like either very tall T's or L's. The top of all the light fixtures are well below the first floor elevations of the neighboring residences, just further demonstrating that there's going to be no light impact to those neighbors based on the proposed site lighting for this project. To address the comments of the Conservation Board, some of the comments that were incorporated into the plan, they concern about some of the deciduous trees that we'd expect. They recommended planting more hardy trees that would be able to deal with the heat coming off the pavement, so we made those revisions. They wanted some variety in the evergreen trees that were planted behind the site. We opted to keep the abrevieties as the main chunk of the screening in the back along the back face of the wall, but some of the evergreens on either side of the wall were swapped out for a different species just in case there was an issue with disease. The screening itself would not be completely taken out. They had asked for additional landscaping in the bioretention area that's located on the northwestern side of the site, so we added some more plantings in there. Some of their comments that we were not able to incorporate into the plan included pervious pavers. The soil conditions on site are not permeable. It's hard to get pervious pavers installed over soils that are not conducive to infiltration of stormwater. So that was not incorporated. Another one of their comments was to reduce the amount of work and disturbance within the wetland buffer area. Currently, the stormwater pond, a portion of the access drive, and some of the parking spaces are located in that buffer. We've minimized to the greatest extent practical impervious improvements and work within that area. The stormwater pond obviously needs to be sited on the lower side of the site so that the stormwater generated from the development itself can drain to that area. The access aisle, at its current width, it's tight up front on the front part of the parcel, so we've cited that. The DOT may have comment that they want the aisles reduced slightly, in which case that would reduce some of the impervious area in the buffer, but until we get comment from the DOT, that's up in the air. And then lastly, a reduction in parking was contemplated. Currently, this plan shows a 25% reduction in the parking required by the zoning code. And I know at the initial sketch plans we presented to the board with 31 spaces, it seemed tremendously overparked, and that's why we went with the reduction in parking as well as moving the loading area away from the neighbors. The applicant did provide parking data from their storefront that shut down further down the street. They provided peak day last year for their two busiest shifts, which are 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. During these shifts, they saw 367 guests from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 353 guests from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Majority of these sales, 71%, were through the drive-through, leaving 29% in-store sales. Using those numbers, the peak parking calculations for the highest day last year was 22 guests per hour from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 26 guests from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. With these numbers and based on the parking we've got proposed on the site, total of 31 spaces, 24 spaces if we're not counting the employee-only dedicated parking that's on the drive-through side of the site. We feel that the parking we provided is adequate and even more so that this facility is going to have 2 drive-through lanes rather than the existing facility that only had 1. We anticipate that more traffic is going to go through the drive-through as it's more of a easier to get through now that there's 2 lanes. Will facilitate traffic moving through quicker. That's our justification for requesting a waiver of the 25% of the parking requirement. And I'm just going to turn over the presentation to Isaac, who's going to discuss the changes that were made to the sound study based on the public comments as well as the comments of the board.
Thanks, Ruben. A pleasure to be here with you all tonight. Thanks for having us. So yeah, just a recap of what we discussed at the last time we were before you. A few elements into our noise study analysis would be the drive-through kiosk, as well as operational vehicles such as garbage trucks, box delivery trucks, and garbage removal. We have expanded on our analysis of the box trucks that were coming late into the evening between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m., as well as the rooftop mechanical equipment. Since then, we have received sound data for these units that we've taken under review and done a bit more than our preliminary analysis. So today, I just wanted to recap with the kiosk. We were meeting all of our criteria, and in some cases approaching an audibility when assessing 2 residences that were a further distance away. This is taking into account the 8-foot barrier wall, as well as the board-on-board fence. Additionally, the kiosk had the automatic volume control that adjusts to the ambient noise level. So for that, we were assessing 2 worst-case scenario, as well as with all the trucks. In regards to the delivery trucks and garbage removal, we were receiving levels that were meeting all criteria with only 2 exceptions. That was the 18-wheeler that was coming during daytime hours, which was only 2 decibels above our stringent criteria that was also taken from other studies within the area. And the box truck was formerly exceeding criteria, I believe, by 4 decibels. Since then, we've revised our analysis based on the delivery and driving path of the box truck. It's our understanding that the box truck delivery path involves a stop at the vestibule near the front end of the site, as opposed to the pass-by at the rear side, closer to the proposed board-on-board fence. Taking that into consideration and the much greater distance attenuation that we're able to account for, the box truck that is delivering between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. is now well below our criteria of only 3 decibels over the ambient level, which was more stringent than other studies within the Yorktown area that we referenced. In regards to the rooftop HVAC equipment, our updated analysis shows that close to the equipment, that's the sound power level, was 95 decibels, which was approximately equivalent to our preliminary analysis. And taking into account the spectral content of that equipment at various frequencies, we performed our analysis, and due to the distance attenuation, the board-on-board fence and barrier wall, as well as shielding from building elements, since it's actually faced away from the receiving properties, we are in conformance with the criteria that we've established, and in some cases approaching a inaudible and subjectively non-distinguishable level. Additionally, we wanted to address comments that were discussed about the proposed fence mitigating noise from neighboring commercial properties. And our general analysis is that wherever the fence for this project is blocking line of sight between other commercial properties as well as residences, there is approximately a 5 decibel or more attenuation from noise that's already existing outside of our own Duncan project. I believe that covers most of what was discussed at the last meeting. I wanted to, of course, see if there were any other questions from the board.
Can you just quickly go through, for instance, Table 3 and just explain some of the numbers there?
Absolutely.
I mean, you can pick one, just as an example, if you want to do garbage truck or
Sure.
box truck, whichever you like.
Yeah.
Explain what those numbers are telling us.
Absolutely. So we have the calculated noise, which is what is reflective of the calculations we performed based on sound data that we've used either from other empirical studies or resources that are available to us. And the middle column, the analysis criteria.
Well, the calculated noise would be the calculated noise of, for instance, the garbage truck? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That is the calculated noise of the garbage truck or box truck at each receiving point. So that would be the residential property line or the residences that are further back from the proposed fence.
Got it.
The analysis criteria was established based on our 24-hour study that we did with a microphone at the property line. So we had referenced previously studies by the DEC that had a 6 decibel increase over the ambient being an acceptable range to be what would be considered not unreasonable noise or unnecessary. At nighttime, again, this was reduced to a more stringent 3 decibel exceedance over the ambient level, which is that next column. The minimum ambient level is based off of our noise study.
So the analysis criteria, the middle one, for instance, with the garbage truck, it's showing at the property line 66 decibels and at the residence 64. Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. So the 66 is in reference to, again, the residential property line, and that is based on daytime levels, given that activity for the garbage truck would only be during the daytime, based on information we've received from the client. So our minimum ambient level at the time of its operation is 60, and then based on criteria that's been set, the analysis criteria is 6 decibels above that.
Okay. So your limit is 66
Correct.
for it to be okay.
Yes. For it to be
At the residence, it's 64 in order for it to be okay,
correct.
right? And one other question, which is probably will seem simplistic to you, but just so we're clear, when you say approaching inaudibility, you mean that it is nearly unable to be heard?
It's a subjective phrase that we use when things are approaching a level of about 10 decibels or less. This would apply more toward steady state noise, which is the operation of a truck idling perhaps, or mechanical equipment running, as opposed to speech that might be a little more interruptive.
So the garbage truck, you're saying you're calculating will have a decibel level of 50 at the residence?
That's correct. Due to the
And you're saying that is almost inaudible?
in comparison to the minimum ambient level of 58, it is approaching that threshold.
And a 50 decibel sound level would be, give me an example.
Yeah, of course. Around 50 decibels would be maybe background noise played in a lobby that you could hear, distant light traffic or moderate rain outside, perhaps a washing machine in your house, if it's a newer one.
Thank you. I'm done. Yes, sir.
So I know that we were talking about the mechanical equipment on the roof, and I understand it's being blocked by some of the roof line, but we had discussed, because neighbors were concerned about it, putting a barrier wall behind the whatever finishing wall that you had, or a finishing fence or something. Is that not the case any longer?
Ruben, could you speak to that? I think there was some more discussion about that.
Following the meeting, we had discussed the potential of having, because there's that fence line that closes in the HVAC equipment. We discussed it with the client, and it was recommended that we do not add any solid barriers around the equipment to allow enough airflow to the units, allow them to function properly, and that, as Isaac mentioned, because of the roof line and where those units are situated, that the height discrepancy and how they're sat into the building would be enough attenuation without adding additional barriers for the units.
I mean, that was a major concern for some of the residents. They came up and they spoke about that. So is there any way you could add that back in, just to, do the right thing and I mean, how much space are we talking about that is not going to be enough airflow? I mean, how tight is it up there that the equipment is butted up against the wall, that there's not going to be airflow?
If I remember correctly, the angle of the building,
Right.
The slope of the roof.
the slope of the roof made it so
Block
that it would block it with the architecture.
Basically, the angle of the roof.
No, I understand.
You're taking the attic space and exposing it to the outside is kind of the definition of what I think he's doing. So
So it was kind of hidden by the architecture.
you have that side wall on both sides, kind of acts as a barrier almost towards the residents behind.
No, I know, I'm just looking for an additional barrier, you know, because that was a major concern for a lot of the residents, and, you know, to be quite honest, it's what? It's air conditioning and it's a condenser and an or whatever is up there? Yeah, that makes a lot of noise, I mean, so,
And the report prepared by Isaac's team demonstrates that even without that additional barrier, that the sound meets the criteria levels.
I know, I understand it meets it. I'm trying to exceed it, just because of the concerns of the neighbors. That's all.
You want to take that?
Similar to the table that's up on the screen, but table 4 is where we've presented our findings on this study. At the residential property line, the calculated noise level was 40 decibels. In comparison to the 53 decibel analysis criteria, a 13 decibel difference is very significant, and at that point is, actually here we have meeting analysis criteria, but for equipment that is running rather consistently. So again, that's a steady state condition. That would be actually approaching inaudibility, and this is all based on our very stringent nighttime criteria of only 3 decibels above the ambient level. At the residence, we did note that based on heights and geometry, this equipment would be, it's not in the line of sight due to the shielding from the building itself, but say the building were not there, then it would be in line of sight. But considering that it is, it's still a significant drop from our criteria.
I think we said in the beginning, you know, usually it's traffic. You know, that's the big concern. Isaac, you're gonna be the MVP here, because this and the lighting are the biggest with the residential behind. I think it was very good to hear that the fencing and the landscaping that's being put in will actually sound like it will help the neighboring property that has been so controversial with the lighting and the noise. So I think we all appreciate that. And obviously, you've been retained by the owner, so this, as we go through, and I'm sure we'll word it in a way in our resolution, that at some point, this get checked out in the field. So that we know what has been proposed is what is out there. Because again, you know, it's a very sensitive topic, as Councilman said. Anything else from the board at this point?
None here.
No.
And I gotta say, you guys have really, really been very attentive to all the questions and all the issues that we've brought up over time, and we really do appreciate it. I'm sure it's gonna be very successful. So, John, at this time, I know they're looking for certain things. Where do we stand?
We're through the hearing, right?
Yes.
So we can start to develop, you know, a draft resolution for you. I think that we'll probably have some conversations with the team to make sure that, you know, we have all the details as we expect them to be, and bring it back to you.
I think they were more concerned about lead agency and neg deck, so you can get the state going.
Correct. And then an official motion by the board to reduce the parking below what's required by zoning. I know there was a consensus among the members earlier on in the sketch plan phase, but I don't believe there was a motion made for the reduction of parking, or if that's necessary.
That'll be in the resolution.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so we're in good form. All right, any other questions?
That's all. So we'll work with John and Robin to iron out the resolution. We'll come back next month for the adoption.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Garden Lane Apartments. This is a discussion of a residential site plan. Location is Old Compound Road and Garden Lane. No, I'm good. I was picking on them before. They got their own stash over there. Look, they've been tearing
Got
it.
a private one.
Take this with you. Billy ate the chocolate eggs already.
I'm going old school again.
That's all right.
That's fine.
All right. I think Robin has, Robin has a PDF, so if you want to put some of the stuff on there, that's fine. Sorry, Dan. Good evening, everybody. So we're here again. I'm not going to start from the beginning on the project. I think we've been here like probably 4 times. I think you guys got the gist of it. In the meantime, we've been at the other agencies. We've been at the Conservation Board, the Architectural Review Board. We got comments from each board. We got comments from the Building Department, which included some Fire Department comments. And I think we've addressed all the comments that were put in front of us by the other agencies. We were at Architectural Review Board last week. Last week. And they had one comment for us. We've addressed that comment, and we've just changed the entrance of the building to, agree with their request. We were at Conservation, I think we were yesterday, last Thursday. We addressed all their comments. The only thing that was left from the Architectural Review Board was the lighting plan, which we have a lighting plan which we've updated. We've addressed their comments, and we have a foot candle reading here. I don't know if you guys got the updated drawings last week. If not, I have 11 by 17. I'll just hand them out to the board.
I think we got them.
These are the updated elevations, lighting plans, and landscape plans. We have our landscape architect that's here.
No, thank you.
He's gonna talk about the,
Thank you.
Updated landscaping.
Thank you.
I don't need that if you need it.
All comments from all boards have now been addressed. I'm not sure if this board has any other comments for us. Again, I think we've addressed everything that's been put in front of us. The only thing I think left for tonight is I do want to have Dan just talk a little bit about the landscaping plan that we have. We didn't present that to the board, but if we could just have Dan for a quick presentation, talk about the landscaping plan and what we're doing with the tree reforestation. I think that's really all that's left for us to discuss. So I'll introduce Dan Sherman. He's the landscape architect.
Hello, Dan Sherman, landscape architect. I have my own plans, if Robin, she's showing it right there. So I've prepared the landscape plan on 2 pages. One is 20 scale, and that's the perimeter of the site. And then I zoomed into 10 scale to show what was right around the foundation of the building. And the foundation, I really applied a very native list, even around the foundation of the building. We addressed the balconies and the ins and outs with inkberries and spice bush and arrowwood viburnum and winterberry and things that are interesting but native mostly. And then in the perimeter around the site, we on the south side, we are screening the neighbors that are on the south side with that row of arborvitae, because it's only 8 feet in width, and so I couldn't do spruces or anything bigger because they would get too wide. And in the southeast corner, we're leaving the trees because that's not going to be disturbed, but I'm underplanting it with some shrubbery so that it looks more native, more natural, again with clethras and spice bush and things. And then in the buffer area, we have wet tolerant plants. That's the the northeast corner, the upper right-hand part of that page. So there's a substantial number of trees being removed, and we did have a presentation with the Conservation Board, and they pointed out that Norway maples are invasive. And so I went back on Friday, and most of the trees are Norway maples. I took pictures of the leaves of the lower trees. So right now we have 10 of the trees that are regulated, and that adds up to 151 caliper inches. And in the new plants that I'm putting back, averaging them at 3-inch caliper inches, I'm putting back 207. But we're putting back 26 canopy trees that are young, new ones, red maples and swamp maples and river birch. And then there are 43 other trees that are evergreen, like Norway spruce and hemlock, and then the arborvitae. So a total of 69 new trees going in for a caliper inch at an average of 3 inches at 207. Many of the trees are dead, so I didn't count those. But then when I looked again, that the Norway maples are just big old Norway maples. So that's the story with the trees. And we're also putting a row of swamp maples along the north side, where as you enter the drive, you can look into the right-of-way property. And we're proposing 34,000 square feet of invasive plant removal, which is mostly cleaning up the site on the south side, north and south, the east side, the right-hand part of my drawing. The areas where the trees are remaining, and in the buffer, we're removing there's bittersweet and burning bush, poison ivy mostly, and that will be removed. I think that's about it. If there's any questions about the landscape? I can point out that the row of swamp maples along the north side is not on the plans that were submitted. We added those late last week. And I also changed, I think the Architecture Review Board commented that the sugar maple, in their opinion, was invasive, but it isn't. It's a New York State tree. But we switched it anyway to a red maple, just to comply with their comment.
It's a nice plan. Any concerns, John?
I don't have any questions.
Looks like a very nice plan.
Well, thanks.
Looks good.
So lastly, just to just go back to the lighting plan. So we had selected some light fixtures, and we did a foot candle study, and that's all in that package I just gave to you. That was submitted to the planning board for their review. You know, we're really we are complying with all the lighting requirements. I think there's on the north side of the property, which is where the paper street is. We're spilling off, I think, 0.3 foot candles onto the property, but I don't think that's going to ever really be developed and really bother anybody. We wanted to get the high overhead lighting to come down on the drive, again, on the north side of the property. So you can see, again, on the north side of the property, it's barely a little bit spilling over, and that's really it. The Architectural Review Board asked us to consider some bollard-type lighting or a different lighting that's not mounted on the building, projecting light straight out, and we got a new fixture, and we got the bollard fixture on there. So we, again, are complying with the ARB's request also. That's really it for the lighting plan and our presentation. So I'd like to respectfully ask the board if there are any other comments. We'd like to go to a public hearing and move the project along to completion. I'm not sure if there's anything else the board needs from us at this point in time.
I do think you've picked out the bollards are very nice, and I think you really spent some time looking at the lighting. With the spillage onto I don't think that's
It's under the 1 foot candle, so
okay,
it's compliant.
So, okay.
The only thing I would ask is, your catalog cuts you're using an RSX1 head, right? It's not the type that is tiltable, is it?
I'm not 100% sure, but the way, if it's not tiltable, the way it's presented on the drawing, we are getting coverage all over the drive, and even with the bollard lighting where the parking is. So I think we're meeting the parking requirement for that,
Right.
the lighting.
Yeah.
But I'll double check on
Yeah,
that.
because it shouldn't and can't be tiltable, because once you tilt it up, it is now unshielded. If it's 90 degrees, we can, make the case that it's shielded at least from
Oh, I
the
understand.
horizontal, so.
Okay,
You gotta achieve what you're achieving at a 90 degree.
okay. If it is tiltable, I gotta believe there's a locking mechanism on there, so it does stay that.
Well, there is,
90?
you can select the non-tiltable heads here, so.
Okay, all right.
You got, you have you have the whole catalog cut for the whole series. So we just have to hone in on what you're actually buying and proposing.
Not a problem. We'll take care of that.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to point out is, and I didn't find it in here yet, but, I'm assuming these are LED, and we'll have to pay some attention to the color temperature of them. They should be under 4,000 K. And we can go over that together
Okay.
if you want to.
Okay, yeah, not a problem.
All right, so we comfortable going to set a public hearing?
Set a public hearing, sure.
All right, I would make sure that you work with John and Robin to make sure that the Ts are crossed and the Is dotted.
Yep, we will.
Next one in May.
Robin, we can set that up? 22nd? Okay? Devil's in the details. All right, so
Sounds
just
good
make
to
sure we
me.
get everything going.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Sherman, nice plan. All right. Next, we're going to move on to Underhill Farm. This is a discussion of historic resources. Location is 370 Underhill Avenue.
Hello, everybody. So tonight, we're here to discuss the cultural resources aspects of the project. Beth Seelig from Hudson Valley Cultural Resources Consulting is here. She can give a presentation and recap everything that she had previously shown, or she has been working with the town consultant and can give you an update of where she stands with that. So, would you like a full presentation, or just pick up the discussion from the back and forth with the?
I think it's been long enough. that
Is
we
our
should probably-
discussion, is our consultant
Yes,
here?
yes, they are. Two of them. They're right there.
You want to
Like
come
to
on
hear
up to
from-
the table?
Come on up.
Come join the party with us. I do want to mention, we do have a bunch of memos that were brought in. We got one from Susan Siegel. We have one, excuse me one second, from John Flynn, Frank Fang, Ronald Bronk, Armando Romano, Nick, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, DeAndrea, I believe, Elmer Escobar. We got one from Gerard Longajo, I believe that's the name. Wendy Frank. What is the name on this one? There's not a name, but
We
it's
don't know that one.
Batchum 16 was the email. We have one from Susan and Steve Delede, I believe. Yorktown Heritage Preservation Commission. And then we have the boards. Just wanted to note that, thank you.
Okay, so you want a presentation?
I think we got to go, yeah, this has been long enough where we probably should refresh it.
I broke it.
You don't want to tell Tom that, he just fixed everything.
Sort of afraid to touch it now. Well, all right, hopefully hopefully it'll carry through. Beth Seelig, Hudson Cultural Services, formerly Hudson Valley Cultural Resource Consultants. I have been working with Unicorn Contracting on the Soundview project to facilitate and coordinate the State Historic Preservation Office review and the cultural resources aspect of the project. Play the slide. You gonna play the slideshow? I was just going. I'm trying. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 5.
There you go. So this is the historical image, the lithograph of Floral Villa, the Underhill estate. And as we've discussed, you can see the main building there, some of the outbuildings, and there has been some artistic creativity. There's no record of a giant lake out front of this building. So there's been a little bit of creativity involved, but we can see the general setting and the general area of the historic estate. Brief history. The estate was built between 1828 and 1886 by Abraham and Edward Underhill and their family. In 1907, it was purchased from Henry and Catherine Keir by Gilbert and Anna Simonton Beaver. They operated a dairy farm on the property prior to establishing the Gilbert Beaver Conference Farm in the 1920s and 1930s. They ran the Beaver Conference Farm as a religious organization focused on socio-civic activities. They offered retreats. They did a lot of overseas work in terms of supporting underprivileged and poor countries. Sorry. Trying to remember some of this myself. The conference farm was inherited by Gilbert's second wife, Jean, who died in 1985. The Soundview School took over the premises and operated a school there until recently when the school foreclosed. Next. These are this is a map from 1979 of the buildings that were on the property at that time. Those in brown, Building D and Building F, have been demolished. Robin did provide information regarding when those permits were pulled. The building in red there, that's the mansion that's going to be retained and rehabilitated as part of the project. Building C, which is all the way up in the upper right-hand corner, is an early 20th century residential structure. Buildings J and I are over on the left-hand side, and those are early 20th century buildings that have been renovated in the mid to late 20th century. Building H is the chapel there, right on the northern side of the pond. We believe it was constructed somewhere around 1920, 1930 in relation to the Beaver Conference Farm. And then Building G is right next to the chapel. That's a carriage barn. And then right there, sort of in the middle behind the mansion, is Building B, which is the small building that was most recently used as the music school. This is the 1926 aerial of the property, and you can see the general layout of the buildings. And when you're looking at this aerial, you can see on that northwestern side of the property, there were a number of large barns and other buildings that have subsequently been removed, that are no longer present. This is the facade of the mansion that we see when you drive by. This building, as I mentioned, is going to be retained and rehabilitated as part of the project. Next. This is Building B. This is the small building behind the school. We estimate the construction date to be early to mid-19th century, although it has been, the interior has been substantially renovated. The foundation is a mix of fieldstone and brick, and there's all sorts of various lumber types right there in the basement. Next. This is Building C. This is the early 20th century residential structure. It's all the way up in the northeastern corner. This is Building C. Sorry, my numbers are getting mixed up. This was once a livestock barn. In 2016, it was fully renovated as part of a project that the school completed. They updated the windows, they redid the siding, they made a number of changes. This is the carriage barn. That's been changed over time. You can see the varying openings, the varying fenestration on the building. Next. This would be the chapel there on the northern side of the pond. Next. This is building I that was used most recently by the school as a playhouse. And then lastly, building J. This appears to have been apartments or similar residential type structure. The SHPO, we have not made very much progress since I last spoke to you about the SHPO review, being that we have a draft LOR that has been submitted to the SHPO for review. Nancy Herder indicated that it would be executed after the completion of the seeker process and the Yorktown Planning Board's public comment process. Because the LOR features mitigation measures under which the Planning Board would have comment and oversight, she wanted to make sure that all public comments that were considered or any changes that were made were brought into the final LOR. So she was not going to execute it prior to that process closing. And that way these mitigation strategies are fully incorporated in the seeker process. The project, as we know, will preserve the setting around the mansion. The applicant is proposing to restore and maintain the pond, the landscape. The removal of the trees will be subject to review by the local advisory commission. The goal is to maintain as many of those trees as possible. The paths and stone wall around the mansion will be retained, as will the entry gates and the stone pillars that we see along the roadside. The goal is to integrate the property throughout the Yorktown community as part of an adaptive reuse of the mansion. The park grounds will remain a monument to the Underhill's history in the local community and their contributions to that history. The property will be accessible, the park property will be accessible to the Yorktown community, and by retaining the mansion and that park-like setting and the pond, this piece of Yorktown's history is going to be retained. And that's where I have it. And that's our up-to-date. I don't know if we want to let the consultants present their comments or if we want to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful. Are you prepared to talk, or? You have to go to a mic, or Tom's going to be upset. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
My name is Sarah Masha. I'm here with CC Saunders from Historical Perspectives. I wasn't planning on actually being here this evening, so if I'm a little rusty, it's that reason.
That's okay.
We actually did review everything. We went over lots of material. You have collected a lot of material. I'm impressed on this property. And we sort of divided into various categories, the archaeology, the architecture, historic research, and I think there was one more. And I think it's just basically what's going to happen with the letter of resolution. So we were looking at it, the archaeology. Beth's done a lot of work on the site. We had a few minor comments and a couple of comments about some of the areas of archaeological concern that we have. It's already been accepted. The reports were already accepted by SHPO, so we started there and looked at what could be done to maybe help with some of the comments that the public has and maybe ease some of their minds that all of the archaeology that could be done will be done and has been done. And so that one of the areas of concern was looking for some domestic shaft features and when apparently maybe privies, outhouses, things around the old buildings might be still present there. It's sort of hit or miss. There was a lot of coverage of the property with the shovel tests, but shovel tests only get so far. So a lot of times archaeologists will recommend to do some monitoring during the construction phase of the project to make sure that there's any feature like that, if it is hit, will be at least examined and some of the artifacts collected, because those are the artifacts that could be used for educational purposes if something like that is still present. The couple of questions we had about the archaeology and the historic research were Beth's covered a lot of that in various places and in various letters, in various reports. So we made the request that maybe putting together into one addendum all of those various parts of research that she's done on the property to answer some of the questions that the public has about revolutionary connections and other connections could be all put in one place that would go as an addendum to the SHPO report and therefore be available to the public. A lot of this is available to the public, but not everybody knows where to go and to look at individual little pieces and parts. So we just recommended that all those parts should be put together. As far as another area, what we were looking at was the actual buildings and the building assessment. She's recommended, SHPO's recommended, everybody's recommended that before any of these ancillary structures, et cetera, go down, that a complete report is done on all of them, because once it's gone, it's gone. So you want to collect as much data as possible on the buildings, and that would require, a photographic documentation, additional documentation that's sort of to the level of Habs Hair Level 2, and that is also leading me to the next thing. Some of that's planning to be done, and that will be put into the LOR. And that LOR is the final result of this, and it will help by putting mitigation measures together so that the loss of this property will be softened a bit by not losing everything. When you have recorded information, you have this detailed data that you put into a report. It's always there so that you can share it, local history, share a lot of other things. Some of the things that we had also said was this part of mitigation could also have a engineer come in and look at the buildings, because if there is some way to reuse them off the property somewhere, that may be a possibility as well. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I'm an archaeologist. So, that was one of the questions that we had. So in our memorandum that we put together, I'll just say the additional steps, just to do a summary, we said that maybe the investigation of additional judgmental shovel tests or archaeological monitoring for historic shaft features could be done. And as the landscaping construction activities are initiated, this could be done around the vicinity of the main house and maybe one or two of the buildings that are closer to the main house where they may have had a cistern or something like that associated with them at one point in time. Updating the field map that she had for her report to include the notations and locations where testing could not be completed, including directly around the house and in areas that were sloped, et cetera, would also go a little bit further in showing the public why some areas look blank on an archaeology map, and that happens at all archaeology reports. Combining all of those responses, as I said, and into one addendum document. Specific information to include the documentation of the ancillary buildings should be completed. Relocation of a couple of little things. Relocation of the parking lot from the front of the building. We had an architectural historian who also looked at that and said, that's going to ruin the whole setting. When you're looking at it from Underhill Road, you don't want to see cars or trucks parked in front of the building. You'd like to see them sort of on the sides. So you still have that sense of setting, of looking at the house from the road the way you always have. Also, maybe reduction of some of the wing, especially the eastern,
Yes.
Thank you, wing on that side. So you can, when you're coming up and around that corner, it's not the main house is not going to be blocked from public view, and you still have that whole setting on the corner and that feeling of what it would have looked like in historic period up to the present. And then, we had also recommended maybe input from the public on the final dispersal of donation of any salvageable buildings or building architectural elements in the buildings. Could maybe be something that the public could help with. And in confirming that the final LOR represents what SHPO and all parties involved have agreed upon as the project moves forward. So that was our basic, in a wrap-up, recommendations.
Can I ask you, I've got a bunch of questions.
Sure.
First, we're constantly criticized, I'll say, sometimes rightfully so, for the approval of older buildings or buildings that would be historic in nature
Right.
for removal. In your experience and for what you do,
Right.
Just for public knowledge, what protections or what tools do we have, if any,
Right.
to protect those buildings?
Well, obviously, the biggest is to create a landmark law. Your local laws are the best and the strongest. A landmark law where you identify it as, you know, it would be something that the Board of Trustees would probably have to do. To create a landmark law would, and then identify these properties as local landmarks. That's your strongest, and have legislation written in it that would say that this local, you know,
So if that doesn't exist,
right.
the house that's older, if someone came in and wanted to demolish it, is there any control over that?
Well, that would be you.
But,
But legally,
right,
yes, I mean, SHPO can come in and give recommendations. They're probably not going to prevent the demolition, but when you have something that is really strong with your local history, you know, your planning board, your board of trustees has the ability to protect those, especially the board of trustees has the ability to protect.
by creating law.
Yeah.
So the project that's before you, you had the three comments about removing the parking lot, the reduction of part of the wing, and input from the public. You've been out there, you've studied everything. Is this, in your professional opinion, preserving the historic intent of that site?
Okay, so there's just two ways of looking at it. You know, part of history is also evolving. So you can't have, you know, history is not static. History is not going to stay in 1620 or 1750 or 1824. Things change,
Right.
and things are going to change. But when you want to preserve a little bit of local history or something of the past, the feeling and the setting of the past, sometimes you do the best you can by preserving the main body of the property. If there's, you know, obviously there's no, you know, endless supply of money to protect everything and anything. So, I mean, I don't know. It would be up to your citizens and your board to actually come through and see what do you want to save, what do you don't want to save. You've already put a lot of that together. You have the historic overlay. You have, you know, lists of historic structures and things that have been put together in the survey from 2006, et cetera. You have a lot of that sort of meat to sort of work with, and then from there, you know, that's where your strengths lie.
So
So did I answer your question or not at all?
Yeah, and it's, like you said, it's always kind of evolving, the questions. So the buildings that you saw out there that were renovated heavily, when do they lose their historic integrity or?
It depends. Okay, so here's what depends. Inside or outside? Inside or outside?
Inside or outside? Yes, because if they are renovated, I'm CC Saunders.
I see.
We work together. The interior is usually not the most critical because you're driving around this corner and you want to see the historic setting of the building. So if you have got this historic house in its setting, which are these ancillary buildings that have always given it this feeling, you don't necessarily worry so much about the interior. The mansion itself, you would love to have some of the interior saved, but again, that's not as critical, we think, in this situation as conserving that setting. If there's any way you could have, if say you're going to put up a gazebo or something around the ice pond, then maybe use some elements of one of the structures. You can't say, as Sarah says, you can't save everything, but just give it as much breathing room as you can so that the house is not so overwhelmed by and encroached upon by the new architecture.
So there've been some other questions that came up. There was some comments that this might be part or was part of the Underground Railroad. There was, and I know this was a very large parcel of property that was
Yeah,
owned by one
this is
family.
a small remnant of a larger property, and the Underhills were a big family, and
Right.
they had several residences.
Right.
I am not 100% familiar with their connections to the Underground Railroad. I think that's a master's thesis in the making, but I you know, it is something to be cognizant of, but to actually make those connections, if you want to tie it into it's very difficult, but if you want to tie it into that property, you know, one of the things, these are teaching moments. These are things that you can pass on. I don't know if the ancillary structures had anything to do with it or if it was the main house. I know a lot of people are talking about the root cellars or I think you call them root cellars in the back, or the tunnels going in. Maybe they were originally used for something like that. I don't even know if there's a date for those at this point when they were installed into the house. So, you know, that would take a lot of work to actually tie that together.
To the family, to the movement.
Right. But that doesn't mean that you want to dismiss it. You want to have that sort of information available. So when you are doing the mitigation for this and taking the pieces and parts and maybe doing putting some display together, maybe working with the Yorktown Museum, something like that, then you could tie in some of the photographs of the building, maybe some of the building elements, things like that, to that history that passes that on.
But don't put it down in writing until you can
know and prove it.
Because that connection is often touted, and it's very difficult to prove.
And it's also pointed out when you make a mistake. So
Right.
you got to be very careful.
So this was said, it was
Yeah.
put out there, and to this
Well,
day,
I believe that there was a family member that was an abolitionist that was very much, so, I mean, there's possibility. There's possibility for a lot of things.
and there was also comments about during the earlier years, and it was coordinates or something was brought up? At
GIS
some point.
GPS coordinates of
GIS.
the encampment.
GIS, right.
GIS.
Well,
Yes,
yeah,
where
you
the
would use
encampments
GPS.
were. And the encampments, I think that, you know, Beth went and did additional research. She spoke to one of the experts on Rochambeau's camps, et cetera. And while it's likely that it was on the larger Underhill property, we can't prove 100% that it was on this section of the property. The testing that she did, you know, covered almost all the areas except for the areas that were very deep, steep slopes. And those steep slopes are unlikely to be the location of where some of these campsites were or wherever. There are some known sites. I mean, I know that that doesn't mean that there isn't some evidence somewhere. But without 100% excavation, which would be, you know, impossible, you're never going to be able to swear you found it or didn't find it.
So it's a very hard thing to prove.
Yes.
Yes.
I know that there's a lot of work going on, and a lot of people are doing research on this. It doesn't mean that they won't be able to prove it someday.
So,
But there's nothing to specifically tie it to this property
At this section of the property at this time.
at this
okay,
time.
so
yeah.
like Down County, where I grew up.
French Hill.
Yeah,
French Hill.
There's a lot of,
French Hill,
right,
yeah.
there's a lot of, you could clearly point out and prove certain things with history, right? This, it sounds like some of it is more speculative. So,
Well, I mean, I
It's
know a lot.
caution. It's a caution. In
Yes.
other words, keep it in the back of your head whenever there's a property that's going to be developed, because you had these very important activities taking place here. So you really need to go into looking at any site with that antenna up.
And I do know that there's a lot of people that are still doing research on this all over Westchester County, not just in Yorktown, because of the Rochambeau Trail and a lot of other sites that that are being associated with it. It's Westchester 250 is the whole 250 is coming up. So these are important reasons to be aware of that. And to be very cautious when you're looking at a property that may have or be very close to where a site like this could possibly be.
And that's,
There was no evidence, though, that she found.
but the question you ask about, and the public ask about, was it looked at? It is very important, and that's the
why
reason we asked for an
recommended
addendum.
into the addendum to put as much information about it into the addendum as possible that's already been done to share that with the public.
Because it had been done, but it wasn't all pulled together in the report.
And you said something about a complete report of each building.
Okay, so that's more along the lines of doing the Habs Hair documentation. It's a
They don't know
documentation
about-
report.
They don't know.
They do too. They're
Habs and hair, do you understand?
historic American building surveys.
Okay?
They're done on historic buildings, and there's different levels of study. It's a national sort of project, and we're asking for a similar level to that. So you'd have photographs of all the exterior, interior of the buildings, maybe a plan of the building, that's there, and some identification of any unique architectural features, things like that, and the history, as much as you can get a history of that building before it disappears. That's what those little mini reports are about.
And when you say preserving, the site features and the feel of this, when you drive down Underhill or come up the road, it sounds like one of the most important things is the preservation of that existing building.
That's what you see first. That's what hits you.
Right.
That's what hits you.
So,
That's not all.
right, but the look of the front and the pond, and that, I think you said it's not encroached on or smothered in
Yes.
some way?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very hard juggling act. It really is. And you were asking about what laws and power you have.
Right.
If federal money was involved, there'd be a lot more power involved. So that's when it comes in National Register, everybody, talks about, National Register.
But even National Register
But-
houses can be torn down.
Yeah, they could be torn down unless federal money or permitting is involved in the new construction.
And that would protect.
And so local laws are the best.
Yeah, there's a few villages in Westchester County that do have local
We
historic.
do as well.
Yeah.
We have a landmark law.
Landmark law.
Okay.
Well, there you
Yeah.
go.
This building is not on the landmark list. It hasn't been landmarked locally.
No question.
By all means.
Can you, before I get to substantive questions about your recommendations, I'm getting the sense, I'd like you to just explain a little bit how SHPO fits into all this, that letter of understanding, or whatever it's called, the letter of recommendation,
Resolution.
resolution. How does that fit into what we're doing? And then I have two more questions.
All right. It's because of the application that is going to DEC,
So it's triggered the SECRA process.
which it's called Section 1409
Of the state law.
at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, and that Chuck Vandry, who is at DEC, doesn't want to deal with or doesn't have the time or power or understanding, he asked SHPO to deal with
Historic
properties. So it's DEC, but DEC is relying on the expertise of SHPO,
The
the State Historic Preservation Office.
How does that fit into our SECRA work?
Okay, you have to have a sign-off for the DEC permit, and Chuck Vandry at DEC is not
Going to do that.
going to sign off until he knows that SHPO's happy. And SHPO's happy because they have the LOR in place.
But that's not,
So,
is that binding on us?
I don't know. I'd have to
Okay.
ask John or how that ties in.
This one got a little confusing because normally 1409 operates at the state level when you guys oversee seeker. Because of the public outreach for this project and everyone who went to Nancy Herter at the SHPO, she did not close out 1409 until your seeker process closed, because she wanted to make certain that the public who had comments and concerns had an opportunity to be heard, and those concerns could be brought into the letter of resolution. In a normal process, the letter of resolution gets executed and signed outside of the seeker process.
So people went directly to the state
Yes.
rather than come to the town?
They came to you too.
Okay, with the same questions?
Same information, same letters were all submitted to Nancy Herter at the state, and she felt compelled to leave the LOR open until your board closes the comment process.
And you said normal process, which you said this.
Normally they operate independent of each other. So when an LOR gets reviewed, the lead agency for seeker is not a signatory. They're not involved. It's usually agreed upon between the State Historic Preservation Office, the DEC, and then the applicant for the project.
So it operates outside of the seeker process, because in this case, the state, although they are making determinations and entering into an agreement, they are not an involved agency under seeker. Because they really don't have any approval authority over the project or over...
Only in the sense that the applicant needs a permit from the DEC.
Right.
He's not going to, if SHPO doesn't sign off, he can't get his SWIP and his general construction, whatever else he needs from the DEC. Right.
That's what we were saying. That's
Same thing.
Yeah.
So related,
In under seeker, if there was no DEC permit, if it was impacting half an acre instead of over 1 acre, and it was under seeker, the SHPO would not be involved unless the lead agency invited them to comment. And at that point, their information is advisory and opinion only. They have no jurisdiction. You're the lead agency. You're the boss.
related to what Aaron asked, earlier you had said that something was accepted by SHPO. So the letter of resolution is still pending. What is it that was accepted?
The report that
the archaeology report was accepted, the alternatives analysis was accepted, the initial report on the buildings were all accepted by SHPO.
Yeah.
I have a question in terms of the process, again. Sounds like there's no normal process.
This is definitely not normal.
Right, so, but there's been public comment that the applicant acted erroneously in getting this done early, or early or not early, I don't know at this point.
I don't know
Based on everything I've
either.
heard. But I do know that the applicant has signed that LOR. So he signed it with certain stipulations, I think, on his side of.
I saw
Yeah,
the
yes.
draft.
let me
It's a
just-
draft.
Yeah,
yes.
let me just finish though. He signed that, whether it's a draft or not, there's his signature on it, with a list of things he's supposedly agreed to. Now, it sounds to me like it was just waiting for a signature on the other side. However, what I'm hearing you say now is once the secret process is completed, all of the comments that come out of that process are going to be amended to the other side of that agreement that he hasn't signed off on.
It doesn't necessarily have to have all the comments that are in there.
Any, I mean, why would
I
you
mean,
sign a document that then is subject to revision?
Okay, so what they would probably do is look it over and work with your planning board, your planning department, et cetera, to determine if any of those comments can be addressed in this. That's all. Not every single comment, but if anything could be, oh, hey, you know what? Can we soften this a little? Can you know?
Can you make sure you put interpretive panels around the ice pond so people can read about the history of the Underhill?
Can you do this and just maybe add like a couple of other little things in there? That's all that's waiting for the public comment. It's not going to be everything needs to be totally rewritten in the LOR.
So, but this LOR was signed, I think, and I have a copy of it, in 2021, I believe.
Yeah,
So is that out of order for that
Yes.
to happen?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, who would have provoked that to be signed? And then why did this come about is kind of what I'm getting to.
I don't know. I don't know
All right.
why it came about because we weren't involved in the process at that time.
But we have worked on other projects.
Okay.
Where LORs are written, and it can take months for it to go through the process of, in other projects, the Army Corps or a DEC or, you
Or
know.
the planning department, or
Yeah.
or your board of trustees even
Yes.
weighing in. It depends on who Who has the ultimate say? So it can have a variety of different.
And it can be
ways.
changed, and it can go through modifications, but then when all the people have signed it, all four or whatever have signed it, then it's legal and binding.
No,
So I
I understand
think
that.
in
That's true of any contract,
Yes.
basically. One party signs and the other one
Yeah.
doesn't, it's an invalid contract.
This was, that initial one was based on
There was
hopes and aspirations
Since that
and
all these
plans
all
and-
these reports had been are either were accepted or were in the process of being accepted, and therefore let's move to the next level. I think that that's why it was created. Is that?
Well, I can shed some light on it. The applicant and myself had numerous conversations with Derek Rohde at the SHPO regarding the mitigation measures that were included in this document. We exchanged emails, we went back and forth, and he gave us an agreement or the indication that this was good, that it was acceptable. It was signed, and then it was sent to the SHPO. It was after that point that Nancy Herter, who was Derek Rohde's boss, said, I'm going to wait to put this in front of my boss to sign until I am certain that those mitigation measures are not going to be changed based on your review of the project. So it's been very convoluted and very complicated, but when it was signed by the applicant, we were under the impression that it was fully acceptable.
Well, supposing, I mean, one of the major recommendations that I heard tonight was the overall view shed or siting of this house that we're keeping. You're talking about opening it up, not so crowded, don't overwhelm it. Concepts like that may very well end up in a final plan. It may not.
It's true.
If they are, do they then go back to SHPO as mitigation for what?
That is just our recommendations to you. This is not SHPO's recommendation.
Supposing we were to say, yes, this is now going to happen, okay? Does that then go back to the letter of resolution?
It can. I mean, but it also can be what you are approving and not approving.
The
as far as the plan.
LOR was a draft. It was the best estimate of what was going to be
Okay.
approved of at that time. But it can change. And it's my understanding that there are changes afoot for the parking and the sizes of some of the buildings. So all of that is going to be tweaked and changed some.
Okay, and the
That
the
may
other-
not change the LOR.
No, it should not change the LOR.
The tenets of the LOR may still be addressing those changes that are really enhancing what's already been happening.
Correct.
Okay, the other question I had was the mitigation issue. I think the first thought that comes to my mind when I think of mitigation is to avoid an impact and preserve stuff. If that's not likely to happen here, is the other kinds of mitigation that I've been hearing have to do with signage and information, and that's just not the way I would ordinarily have thought of it. So
It's called, actually, in an LOR, it's called stipulations. So, and it says, it's an adverse effect that you are damaging this property, but we're going to accept it
Right.
because there are ways it can be mitigated. And you mitigate it by these stipulations. And one may be signage, one may be making sure that whatever artifacts are given to the local historical society.
Or the pond is going to be open to the public and the
Yes.
property. Those are sort of mitigation measures that are.
Which makes
So
it softer.
are those good measures? Are those measures that you find acceptable on behalf of the town now? You're our
Yeah,
consultant.
no, yes. I actually, I
Yeah.
mean, the access to the property, which is, there's been no access to the property for a long time. So access to the property would be nice. It would be, nobody's going to argue about additional parkland or additional, something like that. I'm not sure how comfortable people will feel walking into what looks like it's a development. But if there's public parking and there's nice place to sit around the pond, that is a positive. Keeping the actual building the way it looks is a huge positive for.
Mansion, yeah.
Yeah.
Major, yeah.
Keeping the mansion is huge because, you know, you're not gonna, I'm not, you know, maybe speaking out of turn, but there's not a lot of people that want to preserve structures that old and that big.
So you're lucky to have someone who comes forward and with this overlay zone, keep that building. That's, because it could be sitting there empty for a long time.
So those are all big positives. Those are in the stipulations. I believe some of those are in the stipulations. But, I mean, we did, you know, everybody always asks for a little bit more, right? And some of that is on the sides of the building to make it, you know, a little bit more prominent that maybe, you know, hide a little bit more of the building behind it or something like that, you know, would be another way to keep this not quite as overwhelming a look of modern stuff overwhelming the house.
And as we were sitting there listening to your review of all the other projects on the agenda tonight, it's trees. I mean, the more trees you can keep, the better, mature trees. So every project, you have some of the same questions coming up. How do you keep the setting? How do you keep it, you know, comfortable?
How do you protect the neighborhood? How do you protect the neighbors? You know, I mean, those are all positives. Trees are big.
When you look at that overhead, that photo you had, was it 26?
Yeah, 1926.
Yeah. I mean, that was a great picture, and it really tells a story.
Robin sent it to us, so we can thank her for
See that?
You were around in 1926, Robert?
I'm sorry.
She was a child prodigy.
There are,
Not a lot of
Can you
trees
zoom in
there.
on that? That's what you know, when you look at,
There's no trees there.
Okay, so there actually are. It's really,
See what I saw?
yeah. No, but see how there's the house is there, and directly behind there's a whole alley of trees on the
Right.
west side and the north side of the building, and they go all the way around. That's what I'm talking about, is sort of that kind of a look around
it sets
that.
it aside.
It's not necessarily with all the outbuildings, because they were probably also trying to give themselves a setting away from the
that.
barns and the you know, the other buildings.
Yeah.
But that is actually what I'm talking a little bit about, is sort of
118.
I just noticed that.
Yeah.
That was all farm, right?
Yeah.
I'm
The Grace Building and the Colwell Banker Building are there. You see them. They were built turn of the century, like 1905, 1907. So the driveway that you see looping around into this property we're talking about, that is essentially where 118 is.
yeah, that one on
Yes.
on that side, yeah, on the
Yes.
east side.
Right. So that's where 118 goes.
Mm-hmm.
Circa 1959.
Yeah.
So the feel then was quite different. In fact, you can only see it from the south side.
It's interesting, so I'm trying to get
That
a
big
feel
corner.
of it.
It's
Yes.
the imaginary lake.
So different. I mean, this really tells a tale.
Well, that looks like a row of mature trees on kind of north of the building. They're not
It is.
there.
It looks like an LA that used to be there.
Yeah,
Right, but they're not there any longer.
no.
I don't think, there may be
Currently.
one or,
There might be a couple.
maybe one or two, but I don't think
Right.
there's no,
The ones that are there are really big, and some may have come down
Yeah.
various times.
The wall's across the street from the property, the opposite side of the street. I don't know if you've seen them. Are they of that same era? I mean, I'm looking at,
well, you can see that on the, right? You can sort of across the street, running
Yeah.
along
You
the
talking about
road,
the intersection? Right there.
before,
right along the
I've
road.
walked up and down that, you know, the road, and you can see on the opposite side, it looks like an older wall.
Well, you know, that's an old road. So that would have been the property boundaries. Everybody, you know, and stone was the way to make your property boundaries.
Yeah.
How old do you think the
stand
road
out.
itself is?
Which one?
That's a good
It was
one.
probably an Indian trail.
I was good.
It was probably an Indian trail.
See,
and
he
I'm
beat me
really-
to that, but I was going to say it's probably a Native American trail that turned into a cart path that turned into a road.
Even on the French army maps.
Yep.
Underhill
Underhill Road is,
exists, Baldwin Road exists.
Yep.
What is Hanover exists? So that was essentially kind of the triangle. 118 didn't exist, 202 didn't exist. Halleck's Mill Road, you know, the cut-through, that existed and went across where 202 is, but that connection was not there either, so. So really, when you look at those maps, you can do some extrapolation and to see where and you can also understand where the bulk of the camp was from those maps, obviously, which went from Hunt's Tavern all the way up to the apex of French Hill, which made sense because you have the high ground to look what's coming up Underhill if anybody's coming at you. They also had people down on near Cat Hill, which you could signal from Cat Hill to French Hill. From Cat Hill, you can see over to the breastworks on the other side of the river, which are on Crow Hill. So all of that makes sense as to why they stationed those folks there. But basically, you can see that the foot of the hill of French Hill did not show any encampments, and this property is at the foot of French Hill. It's actually and Underhill goes between what becomes the Turkey Mountain complex of hills and the French Hill. And you can see that on the French Hill maps.
so, I mean, there's a lot of historic history, I mean, to this property. There's a lot of, but there's also history that goes well into the 20th century. I mean, you can't, one of the things I was saying about how house and properties evolve, even the 20th century, I mean, the Keir family that was there, was important to the history of Yorktown. And those are the kinds of things that I was suggesting that also be brought up and remembered and saved somehow, or at least documented, so that it could be used as a teaching tool for local history for a long time.
There was some time back, there was a forum given up here, and it was about, landmarking things that were close to the period. They actually said, what was the building? It was from the 60s, that it could be landmarked.
Yes,
'Cause it was,
50 years and older.
right, it was critical to that time. It hasn't changed. It's still appropriate at that time.
Yeah, so your raised ranch is up for landmark.
Well, I will tell you, there are some communities that have a community of raised ranches that have been landmarked.
New Canaan, Connecticut. It's the modern mid-century. That's what they're known for.
It's important to your town, local history. What is important to your history? That's what you want to.
I'm sorry, you wanted to say
It's gonna
something?
blow your mind a little bit to tell you that the site of Woodstock
Yes,
Festival
is a
the site of
Woodstock
is
is
National
actually
Register
national.
eligible.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. And they have done archaeological excavations and found all sorts of wonderful things from the Woodstock Festival.
So, I work for a town, and we have six old
I can.
water tanks from 25, and we want to landmark those, because people complain about them all the time, and we don't want to touch them. Right?
They're what
That's
are
why we
they?
can't touch
Water
them.
tanks.
Oh, the water. Well, you know what? I will say that was a big thing coming up in '95. The Cherry Hill one. If you've ever come through New Jersey, that was a big argument. If they ever decided to take that down, if they wanted to landmark that
Really?
water tank, yeah. So it's you're not the only one who's been talked about.
No, we just don't want to touch them. People complain about them all the time.
But in any event, there are some of those things that those local history questions that I don't think you're ever going to be able to 100% say yes or no about, and some of those.
I have to tell you, though, it's so helpful to have this type of consultant on board now with the town, especially as we move forward. And John clearly is a history buff himself here.
Yes, he is.
Rich, I do have a question. So it's clear the mansion is staying. Okay. The other outbuildings, a number of them are inhabitable. They're dangerous. We've done a couple of site visits, and you wouldn't want to go into a couple of them just because of the risk.
I agree.
I think it comes a little bit to what Rich was saying earlier. When does the building lose its value or its integrity as a historic building? Because many of them have been revised and bastardized over
Right.
years.
It depends on what type of local history you're looking at. If we're talking about National Register eligibility, what SHPO had actually identified was a period of time from the 1820s to the 1880s that right? That was the time period that was
Significant.
identified as
Floral villa.
significance that would be eligible. The 20th century buildings, not so much. They are interesting. We don't know everybody who lived in all of them because they may have their own stories. But when you're looking at the property, you probably want to start with those three structures, those three outbuildings, and determine if any of those can be partially reused or something. Of course, the chapel is the cutest building on the property, and it has a great image. It has great imagery. Something like that could be reused or something in another location, or that would be a very exciting one to use. But that's also not from the period of significance, which is that 19th century period. Probably the most interesting, maybe the carriage house looks great. It's an old carriage house. I wouldn't go inside it. And the other little building that's directly behind the house.
The studio.
Yeah, the studio one. That is actually a really cute building. I don't know if that maybe even could be moved somewhere for another.
I don't know.
I don't know.
The foundation is very.
And that would be up to a structural engineer, not an archaeologist.
But it's, we have worked on other sites in Westchester County where we advertised, because SHPO wanted some outbuildings saved, and we advertised to historical societies and so forth in the whole area to say, would you like any of these? Or kind of a thing. And it was part of our
It was one of the
stipulations
in
that
the
we
LOI.
tried to find someone who would take it, who
We
would
even-
need it. We were even going to be underwriting the moving cost, but no one came forward.
Right.
But we had gone through the process of trying to save it. So
That's what I was saying. That is, if you try, if you put it out there, if you try to do it and record everything that you can about it, that's your best bet. And maybe save some of the interesting architectural elements, whether they're inside or outside. You can maybe reuse them somewhere else.
So just a quick question. So from that significant period, what was that period again?
1824 to 1886.
So 88, okay. So on this property, what buildings would you identify that are from that significant period?
They were identified as the three outbuildings behind. I don't know if they have the
So the main house,
main house
of course.
and three of the outbuildings. Okay, so you see the ones in blue?
Yeah.
That was identified in the structures report, the building report.
And out of those buildings, which ones wouldn't you go in, that you would not go into?
Well, I probably, the green ones, well, except for, I don't know about the chapel. The two green ones on the left are not in good condition. Those are not, but the blue ones, probably, I know that the carriage house, which is the blue one on the bottom, that left one, the sort of right above the pond, that one did not look like it was in very good condition. The one in the back is the one that was renovated completely recently by the school.
Well,
And,
even before that.
even before.
Yeah,
So-
the main room that you go into, I think you went into
Yes.
it, right? It has a new foundation, but I was in that when it was still the Beaver Conference Room
there you
for a prayer breakfast or something. So that was renovated or rebuilt or
the
whatever the
80s?
case may be by Beaver Conference Farm, most likely.
70 and 80s.
And I'm sure that the school did some additional work to it.
Yeah.
But the siding is brand new on that. The windows are brand new. The foundation of at least the open area on the inside where you see most of the building is a new foundation block, concrete block
So
foundation.
that one has probably been very much changed. The little tiny one that's directly behind the house is probably the least changed.
The upstairs has been fully renovated and gutted. It's got sheetrock and windows. It was turned into a classroom, so it was made habitable for students.
You have to make a code.
It still has the main foundation, and it does have additional supports in the basement that they put in. But
So as you look at the project as it's presented, I think the big plus here is the mansion is being restored to its original intent. The applicant has said that the pond will be open to the public, people could walk around and access the site. For the most part, the front is staying unchanged, but now we hear about parking lots and some encroachments that might be concerned. That in way of mitigation, the fact that you're saving this building and preserving that front, in your opinion, is that a big plus here?
In my opinion, that's a very big plus, but it doesn't, I mean, I would go one little step further. The documentation and sharing of the history of the entire site is really important, especially important to the people that live here, as we can tell with all the letters, with everything. Everybody's got a connection to this.
Right.
And so, as far as that goes, I mean, I think you've got a lot of big pluses, but I also think that some of those connections shouldn't be lost just because we're saving them.
Right, so as you go through the process, you record everything.
Yep.
Make sure there's a written document.
Make sure as much as you can to save, and like I said, I think that, it will be really nice to have some sort of a exhibit or something like that, or, anything like that, anything educational that can go to the schools to talk about the history of the property.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Any aspect of the history that does not have evidence to prove such history, in other words, it's inconclusive, we should not make those connections.
I think you can make the connections to the family, but maybe not the site.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
We did get a memo from the Yorktown Heritage Preservation Commission, and I'll read this one because
It's short.
it's short and to the point. Dear Planning Board, thank you for making the Historic Consultant Report available in the Planning Board April 24th meeting packet. Regretfully, the report does not address the numerous adverse effect issues documented by the YHPC over the last 14 months. Shortly, we will be submitting our comments to the public record, identifying these unaddressed and unresolved seeker issues.
And a lot of those were the ones that you all brought up already. If they can provide detailed information, then I will learn something.
Don't forget they have an agenda.
Well,
I would suspect anything they have to say.
I think this was a very productive and informative, really helpful discussion.
I have just one general comment. Through this whole process, I've been kind of surprised that there hasn't been that much historical documentation to date. It seems like this effort has started since we have this applicant in front of us. And I think what I'm hearing is we're probably going to be asked to ask him to document some of this and create what you would call, I think, the educational aspects of
Yes.
it. But can you speak to why there's so little previous activity? Because this was such a supposedly, significant property from a historical point of view.
And I've seen
And
this-
yet there's very little to see, and if you look at the building and you walk around, there are vinyl windows in some of those buildings.
Yep, sure.
Obviously, somebody went to some effort to either maintain them or change them or whatever.
Absolutely.
Without any interference from any historical society or anybody else.
Right.
Well, I don't know about that. I wasn't here for that. But I do know, I will say that this is not uncommon. And I can give you some examples. In Tarrytown,
That's kind of what I was asking, is like,
in
is this
Tarrytown, New
usual
York,
or-
on the corner of Main Street and Broadway, was the Cohenhoven Inn and the William Smith Tavern. Washington stayed there. Alexander Hamilton stayed there. There was a lot of activity going on during the American Revolution. People, probably 3 or 4 presidents stayed there over time. And we have one little picture of it. That's it. Nothing else. No other documentation other than people saying, I remember going there as a child, I remember this, and the building was torn down about 1900. It's gone now, but there's nothing. And it was extremely important to the town and village, and so now they're recreated that information so that they can share the fact, hey, Washington slept here. There's also another 18th century building that nobody knew about until 2 years ago, and that was actually landmarked by the village of Tarrytown, so preserved it because it was going to be demolished. So, there's a lot of these hidden gems or hidden right in plain view that never get recorded because everybody thinks it's already been done.
Or everybody it's become such a matter of daily life that building was always there. and no one felt it was threatened, I'm sure. And that happens. I mean, Penn Station was torn down in New York City.
And that's why you have a local landmark law that the Supreme Court supports.
Yeah, so it happens. Every community's experienced this. You lose it, and that's regrettable. But you are lucky in that you are not losing
Everything.
everything.
And I have seen a lot of places where demolition by neglect has happened, where you have a beautiful old building and somebody wants to build something different and lets it just completely fall apart.
That's happened here.
Several times.
Several times.
And so I mean, that is the biggest fear of any historic preservation is to watch that happen.
Not at the Garrigan residence.
No, not there. I have just one last comment. The whole SHPO process, is there anything, I think you said it wasn't typical, anything unusual? Do you get the sense that there was anything inappropriately done?
Inappropriately? No, because everybody has the right to talk. The public has the right to express their opinion. I mean, I've seen things that I think are. In this case, I think it's just everybody has the right to express their opinion, and so SHPO just put on the brakes a little bit to make sure that everybody's opinion got heard. That's what all these public hearings are all about.
And also, Derek Rohde was relatively new.
Maybe. I don't know when they start because,
Yeah.
they sort of start behind the scenes and then they get brought up and then they start emailing you.
So, and that's the other issue, is that there are some people who are very gung-ho with their jobs in the office, and some people who, just pass things through or not pass things through. And I think that's the concern. In this case, I think everything that we mentioned is going to be addressed. I bet.
I'll take 5 minutes and tell you.
Please, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So I'll just go through the comments really quickly regarding updating the field map to include the annotations as requested, regarding compiling an addendum document to put all of those various pieces of history in one document. We have no problem. We will be doing that, and the plan is to have that for you on the next submission that's made. Regarding the additional shovel testing or investigations in the back of the house, I recently learned that the septic system is back there. When we were out there and we were doing our shovel testing, we found lots of disturbed soils. Disturbed mean it's just all jumbled. There's all sorts of things. I received a copy of this plan which shows the position of the septic field behind the house. And you can't really see it on this copy, but if you blow up, you can also see buried propane tanks and lines of electrical things and all kinds of stuff back there. So I have not had a chance to talk to CC and her team about any of this, but we feel that it's been the construction and implementation of the septic would have just dug up anything that was there. The applicant is looking at the relocation of the parking on the front of the house, and they're also looking at the reduction of that eastern wing. And I believe on the next set of plans you receive, you'll see some changes there. Regarding the documentation of those ancillary buildings, about all those outbuildings, that is already included as a mitigation or a stipulation in the LOR as part of the structure documentation packet. The SHPO has certain standards, and they do request that you follow a HABS Level 2, the Historic American Building Survey Level 2, and so that's already been, it's already a commitment made by the applicant. It's going to be done as part of the LOR when the LOR is finally executed. The Unicorn is going to retain a structural engineer to look at the buildings to see what can be offered as salvage or what buildings might be able to be relocated. As part of the stipulations in the LOR already, we are required to offer architectural features of the buildings that are to come down to historic salvage companies. There are companies out there who specialize in historic preservation and rehabilitating buildings, and as part of the process, we will be inviting them to look at the buildings and take whatever they want. If they do take things, what they take will be documented and kept in the record for the project. And there is also a stipulation in the LOR to do an exhibit of some kind. That can be, one of those standing things that gets put out, in a public location so everyone can read a timeline and see pictures of the building. It can be done as a pamphlet that can be distributed, one or both, but there is already a stipulation to do that. So, thank you. That's all I have for you.
Again, really appreciate how prepared you all were. It was a very, very productive meeting, I think.
Does anyone have any questions, anything for me?
John?
I have nothing
Okay.
at present.
I have one last thing. If you could offer some of those to the public before you offer it to salvage company, that would be right up my alley.
Okay.
Actually, that's what I was just gonna ask.
My wife.
If that could be offered to someone local.
If we can, I think we can get the SHPO to agree to that, so.
SHPO will agree.
I'm back. The applicant has a request. The Steve Marino from Tim Miller Associates has been working diligently to try to close up some of the discussions with the consultant, and he is going to be traveling abroad, and we would like to request a special meeting next week to try and wrap up and put some closure to the environmental review of the project, if the board is so willing.
Next week, when?
Maybe we could meet
Third.
overseas
Eh,
someplace.
May 3rd,
May 3rd?
right? May 3rd?
1st, 2nd, 3rd, it doesn't matter.
Wednesday.
Aaron, you said you were unavailable the first.
I can't
Busy
make it the
traveling,
1st,
maybe
I
we
can make it the
fly over and
3rd.
meet him.
He'll be looking at some really old
Oh,
architecture.
okay.
Guys available the 3rd?
Italy?
Yes,
Oh, then we'll go.
yeah.
We'll fly over to Italy and meet him over there.
Oh, that's
I think
good.
that's as much as we could do.
I like that.
We can check out the
Being as
Italianate
cooperative
architecture.
we possibly can.
I like that.
All right, so we're the third now?
You okay with the 3rd?
Are we going to be ready?
I'm good with any day. I want to put it to sleep.
My understanding is we're going to be ready.
Okay, so the questions we had last time will be ready to be answered.
Okay.
So the 3rd?
Came on that.
And anything else that you have?
Yeah, I think, listen, clearly the professionals tonight really answered, I think. I mean, unless we missed something, or the Preservation Board is looking for something else, I think this was a very productive meeting. I think
Third is
that
Wednesday.
really, really helps.
Yeah, I think, Rich, one thing I would comment is, and a lot of under your leadership, the process is working.
Yeah,
Exactly
no, I
what
think
we need to
it's getting there. Now, if we could just get the environmental end, the questions we have,
Thank you very much.
all right,
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
thank you. I love the history stuff. Oh, yes, motion to close the meeting.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Sarah, Cece, thank you very much.
Absolutely.